guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about study hacks for medical terminology. If you're brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. Okay guys, so as you know, I always consider the comments that I get for inspiration for my show. So I got this comment and we're gonna read it. So here we go. The comment says, I'm taking medical terminology. There's so many terms to memorize. As a coder, do we really need to memorize all of them? Okay, so I'm going to say this first, okay? Not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, guys, but let's think about this. There is no such thing as medical terminology that only medical coders use. No such thing. We have to be able to understand everything that the provider writes. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, it's not as hard to learn it only if you are consistent. It is when you start overthinking and when you start trying to cram in too many things all at one time, and when you start trying to memorize what whole words mean, instead of doing it the proper way, which is learning your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. When you learn those, because medical terminology is made up of Latin and Greek words, you are learning a new language. So learn your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. And once you learn those, you will be able to piece these words together so that way you can really understand what they mean. And then after a while, it will become a little bit more understandable to you. But the only way that you do that, again, is by learning your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. And you all have to stop complaining, because it's not this person, but I've seen several complaints from people. I don't understand medical terminology. What are you doing to understand it? Well, I don't know. There's just so much to it. So there's plenty of things that you can do. There's workbooks. There are puzzle books that you can find on Amazon. I leave those affiliate links in the description box below. You don't have to click on them because the title is there, but all the medical terminology and the workbooks and everything else I recommend are there. And so that way you can check those out. And if you don't want to look specifically at the ones that I recommend, then do your own Google search, guys. You can use any medical terminology workbook that you find, from old to new, because trust me, the fundamentals of medical terminology stay the same. So you don't have to have the latest and greatest. You can have an older book. And if you're buying those medical terminology for medical coders, that's a gimmick. That's a gimmick. And you know what? Why they did that? Because medical terminology can pertain to anybody that works in the medical field. But hey, let's make a niche book and let's just target medical coders. Oh yeah, let's do that. Meanwhile, it's the same thing that you would find in any medical terminology workbook. So how did I learn medical terminology? My mom made crossword puzzles for me, and that was how I learned it. Plus, I like to read. I'm a reader by nature, and so I know a lot of these words just because I'm a reader. And I knew a lot of them coming in to medical coding because, again, I already knew the prefixes, the suffixes, and the root words. But of course, I still had to do this deeper dive study because I didn't know it all, but I knew a good part of it. But that's something that you can totally do. There's videos on YouTube that are talking about medical terminology that you can listen to. Okay, so if you get tired of working with the workbook, if you get tired of looking at something, you can always listen. And that will help you with your medical terminology pronunciation as well. Please don't be like me where I mispronounce words, right? Olecranon is one of the ones that I had mispronounced really bad. I call it olecranon, and I was correct as olecranon. I was like, it's olecranon. It was one of my PAs that was telling me that, and I just teased him back. But, you know, it's something that you learn, okay? And you can't learn unless you're actually working with it. So if you are thinking that you're going to learn medical terminology overnight, if you're thinking that you can skip medical terminology and just dive right into the coding and look it up, you're making a big mistake. That's the same thing as if you're trying to learn coding without learning your anatomy. How would you do that? Because then you're not even going to understand what it is that you're looking for. Because it's not just about looking up codes. For people who ignorantly think that that's what we do, just look up codes. No, there's a lot more to it than that. It's a lot more to it than just picking up this or picking up that. We have to comprehend and understand why. Because not everything is black and white. There's a lot of shades of gray in medical coding. And so then you have to be able to understand and decipher all of that. But the the first thing that you got to do is that medical terminology. And a lot of people will tell me, they'll get hung up on medical terminology or anatomy first. Guys, medical terminology, come on. At least that way when you start anatomy, you're going to understand what they mean when they're talking about certain parts of the body, right? So the first hack that you got to do is you got to find a workbook. Now, again, the workbooks that I recommend are in the description box below. I will say this is not an ad for the AAPC CPC study guide, but it does not matter what medical coding certification that you were sitting for, whether it is the CCS, the gold standard of medical coding credentials, the CCA, the CCSP, or the CPC. It doesn't matter. Any one of those. And if you get that CPC study guide, the great thing about AAPC is they got this book right. I will say that. And I'm not with AAPC. I'm not certified with them. I will never be certified with them. But I do recommend things that are beneficial to coders. And this is one of the ones that is very beneficial. Why? Because it breaks it down Barney style. So when you look, even in the first chapter 2, if you have the 2019 version of the CPC study guide, even if you have one of the latest ones, look at the chapter that talks about medical terminology and anatomy review. That's where you can start. Now, if you can get a good primer on your brain and you can start saying, because it breaks it down here, root word and definition, prefix, and suffixes. So these are just a few. But you're going to be able to grow and expand on all of those, because medical terminology does not stop in 6 weeks. It does not stop in 2 months. It continues your whole career. I am 15 years in, and I am still learning medical terminology. There are still some words that even I have to look up, and even I have to sit there and Google some of those words. It's okay to Google medical terminology, but you need to have some kind of grasp on the prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. That's your hack. Learn prefixes, suffixes, and root words. And once you get those down, and it's just a good base. That's a good base to get everything started, because again, you can piece together words rather than trying to memorize whole terms. If you do that, then you're setting yourself up to fail, because the brain will be like, oh my gosh, this is too much. We got to stop this. Rather than just going off prefixes, suffixes, and root words, because that's a lot easier to do. There are tons of flashcards out there. There's Quizlet that you can use for flashcards. If you don't want to purchase flashcards, the flashcards that I recommend are in the description box below. And please don't ask me, guys, because it's there. It's in the description box. I don't answer those questions when they say, what book do you recommend? What specifically this? Especially if it's in the description box below. All right. So that's just what I'm asking you guys to do, is look in the description box. And again, you don't have to click on any of those affiliate links. You can just see the title and order the book on your own. So with those, when you learn those prefixes, suffixes, and root words, then you're on a better path to understanding, because then it's going to help you to understand anatomy. Now, anatomy is very important. And if you think, oh my gosh, there's so much to anatomy. Yes, there is. But meanwhile, in your coding manuals, especially if you have the Optum books and the AMA CPT Professional Edition, they all have anatomy plates in there. So there's material that you can look at, but so that you don't have to memorize. But make sure that you keep stuff around. Do you know, like when you go to the doctor's office and you see those posters up, those anatomy posters, and you think those posters are for you? No. Those posters are to remind the provider of where everything is. They have that constant stimulus. It's like when we were children and we learned in school about the alphabet and the numbers and everything. The teacher had the border around the room that had all the letters and the numbers on it and stuff. And that's how you learned, by constantly seeing every single day that stimulus. It is the same thing with medical terminology. So what you do, hack number 2, is you get into your study space. If you have a particular designated space, which I do recommend that you get a designated space to study in. And then you can hang up pictures of anatomy. You can hang up a list of prefixes, suffixes, or root words. And then you can have that list hanging up maybe 10 10 that you want to focus on remembering. And you can have that up for a week and then turn to the next list. And then maybe that's 10 suffixes. And then the next week, maybe it's 10 prefixes. And then the next week, maybe it's 10 different root words. You know, it's just something that you'll have it in your brain. And it's just little by little by little. And the more you keep practicing, the more you go over those medical terms, the easier that it's going to get. But if you sit there and you bog your brain down thinking that you have to memorize everything, or that there's some magical book out there that is medical terminology for medical coders, and you think, oh yeah, this is only the things that I need to learn, you're setting yourself up to fail, because doctors do not use a book that says medical terminology for medical coders. Oh, we can only use terms out of here. They use the terms that they know, the terms that they were taught. You as the coder have to meet them there. And don't write me saying that this is overwhelming to you guys. I'm not trying to overwhelm you. What I am trying to do though is prepare you. There's a lot of not preparedness in the industry right now, especially with brand new medical coders, because if you tell adults, hey, you got to learn medical terminology and anatomy, you'll find that a lot of schools won't have students because they'll be too overwhelmed to say, oh, I can't do that, I can't do that. You immediately think you can't do something, yet you haven't tried it yet. Does that make sense to you? Like, you're not even trying it yet and you're already running scared. Why don't you just get into it? Why don't you start working with it? And keep in mind that you're not going to learn it overnight. This is going to be a repetitive process. Repetition, the key to adult education is repetition. A very wise surgeon once said that. And she was right. She was right. The key to adult education is repetition. And the only way that you're going to be able to get to where it's going to be a little bit more comfortable for you is to practice. Practice, practice, practice. If you don't practice, then you're missing out, right? So if you have the 2019 CPC study guide, it's telling you here on page 15, in chapter 2 under the medical terminology and anatomy review, even if you have a different year, I guarantee you it's still about the same anyway. And it's telling you what anterior means, also ventral, posterior, dorsal, medial, lateral, proximal, distal, superior, inferior, superficial, and deep. You'll know all of these terms, and the more you get comfortable with them, the better off you'll be. Now, how can we incorporate these things, right? Because I've already said, okay, you can listen to medical terminology videos on YouTube. You can work through workbooks, but you can also do crossword puzzles. You could do word finds. There's a lot of those on Amazon that you can find. Sometimes they are listed as that for like nurses and things like that. So it's not just that you're looking for something under coding. There's other professions that also use medical terminology and that's how they're able to learn as well. But you have to make it fun. On my Patreon channel, I do that. I make word finds and crossword puzzles, and I do all kinds of medical terminology worksheets. There's a ton of them on there, and the minimum pledge is $10 per month. Somebody asked me this morning, if I was going to allow people to join Patreon. Guys, anybody can join Patreon, but the minimum pledge is $10 per month. The lower levels are no longer available, so if you see those and you see that they're sold out, it doesn't mean that I'm not accepting new people. It just means that those levels are sold out. And there's a lot of content on there that you can access for $10 per month. And you certainly do not have to subscribe past a month. You can subscribe if you like and download whatever you want to and watch whatever videos you want to, because there's a ton of videos on there where I talk about myself and other things that I don't bring up here on YouTube, but that's up to you. But yes, I am still accepting Patreon members, and you can have access to all of those things if you join. So, but those are the things that I would recommend. Looking at some fun games to kind of help incorporate medical terminology into something that you can look forward to. And it's not just a chore. And a lot of people look at learning medical terminology and even anatomy as a chore. It's not. the more that you focus on it, and the more that you know that it's going to be a gradual process where you will build up, then it's going to make it a lot easier. Because if you were in kindergarten and then you were expected to read Shakespeare in kindergarten, come on, man. Really? Do you think that happens? No, it doesn't, unless the kid is a freaking genius. But in kindergarten, you learn the letters and your numbers, and then you start learning other things. So you have to build up that knowledge until, like, when do, high school is when kids start reading Shakespeare. And so it took all that time to be able to get to that level of Shakespeare. Although there are some really smart kids, I know that they start doing that in middle school. I did it in middle school. But there's some that they wait till they're in high school so they can start getting into Shakespeare. But that's just something that it's a gradual process and it takes time. It's the same thing with medical terminology. But if you can get those prefixes, suffixes, and root words, and the website that I recommend too is in the description box below. Please don't ask me, guys. Don't ask me. And you can also let your fingers do the walking, so that way you can find other resources out there for medical terminology. But don't just pigeonhole yourself into thinking, oh, this is medical terminology for medical coders. This is all I have to know. No. Because guarantee you're going to run across another word that you don't see all the time because it's something that the doctor is using in their specialty. Okay, so that's the important thing. And even if it takes you where you have to stop and look up words often, you're not going to be in that place forever. You're not going to be in that, oh, I feel like I don't know anything because I constantly have to stop and look at everything. If you have to stop and look at everything, that's fine. But learn it so that way you can build on your knowledge, all right? The other thing I like about the CPC study guide is all of the colorful pictures. All of the colorful pictures, and then all of it labels everything. It labels all the medical terms and stuff for whatever picture that it is demonstrating or whatever. Like for here, the nails, right? It says the nail plate and the cuticle. And then it has a picture of like what the interior would look like. And it says nail fold, nail matrix, nail bed. So it gives you that good visual. And these are just very simple and straightforward. So that way when you see these words, it's not going to be so foreign to you. So that's why I say to take the time and look at all of the things that they have available in here. And they have like the little quizzes throughout. And then it says that the human skeleton is divided into two parts, the axial skeleton and the appendicular. And that's another thing I'm going to talk about too with the hacks is anatomy. But when you think about it, you can put together those words that you've learned from prefixes, suffixes, and root words to kind of help you to know, okay, where are we right now, right? The axial skeleton is consisting of the skull, the hyoid, the ribs, the sternum, the vertebrae, and the sacrum. And then the appendicular skeleton consists of the shoulder girdle, the pelvic girdle, and the extremities. So, and then it gives you pictures here, the types of muscle. And then it talks about what are the types of muscle, like, you know, what it looks like. So that way you have a visual picture in your head. There's the skeletal muscle, the smooth muscle, and the cardiac muscle. And it gives you those answers and it explains what it all entails. So take the time to work through if you have the CPC study guide. If you don't, you should get it. Now, if you get a more current version, they might be cheaper than the 2019 version. The 2019 version, guys, is a ridiculous price now. People say it's because I recommended this book so much and then it started selling a lot. So like now the price is all jacked up. But, you know, if you have the latest version, that is fine. That's totally cool. Make sure that you look at those things. Okay. It doesn't have to be so in depth, your knowledge right now of medical terminology, but it does need to get you moving. Okay. You do need to be moving in the right direction. And guys, another thing too, I'm going to say this before I end up wrapping this video up. If the way that I explain things doesn't help you, then you need to find some place that does help you in ways, maybe with the flashing screens and things like that. But I talk through things. That's what I do. I explain things. But a lot of people have shortened attention spans, and they don't have the attention span enough to pay attention to what I'm saying. Guys, if this is you and you're having a difficult time with the attention span, because I think that's what prevents people from learning medical terminology as well. They don't have the attention span. They don't have the patience to be able to be patient enough with themselves so that they can learn, when in actuality, all they have to do is just kind of sit still for just a few minutes and learn it every day for a few minutes, 20 hours per week. And yes, it is possible. And do this. And then when you go back and you look at all of the time that you spent, that 80 hours, then they're like, oh, okay, well, my knowledge base is a lot more advanced now that I have 80 hours in versus the person who has only 20 hours in. So if you are looking for those little quick fixes and the little quickie stuff that you think that you're going to find here, you won't. Because to me, the slow way is the fast way. There's another YouTuber that I watch. I love Rick. Rick from his channel, Think Like a Horse. Now, Rick is very blunt. He used to be a police officer. He was in the military as well. He's been a trainer and an instructor. So he's very blunt. And I like the way that he thinks, because he said it the best. The slow way is the fast way. If you learn slowly, you will be fast later on. If you learn fast, you're going to be making a lot of mistakes until you slow down, because there's nothing worse than that. You know, people confuse medical terminology all the time. There was a nurse who thought it was so funny on Instagram or one of these ones, and she was saying that she got perineal and perineum confused. And she thought it was the funniest thing because she was at a teaching class or whatever. And she thought it was the funniest thing. That's not funny. It's not funny. If you don't know the difference between those two and you didn't brush up on your medical terminology and know that there's a difference between the two, you need to study more. Because that's not funny. It isn't. You know, and like I said, when you are looking up these codes, if you don't have a strong grasp of medical terminology, you can get the wrong code really fast. And then I don't have to tell you all of the consequences that come from that. Getting the wrong codes. So those are your hacks, guys. Look at, study through the workbooks. Look at the available medical terms and the, as far as like the prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. Look those up in your CPT Professional Edition by the AMA, and make sure that you work through the workbooks to get that broad stroke understanding, and then you can work on the finer details later. But just get an idea of like the general terms until you can start building on that knowledge. It's the same thing as when we were kids, okay? The other thing is to work through crossword puzzles or word finds. You can find those on Amazon. You can find those on my Patreon channel. You can make them yourself because when you teach back, that's another thing too, guys. Some of you could really use that. If you learn something, teach it back. Teach it back to somebody else, or work on a puzzle for yourself and then just work on it later on. So that way you have done a process of doing something like that. And let your fingers do the walking, guys, because Google is the place to be for those types of resources that you can do and you can make and create on your own, okay? There's all kinds of things out there, guys. But it's about doing your research and learning your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words, and stop being taken advantage of by these people that are trying to sell a niche book that says, oh, medical terminology for medical coders. There's no such thing, guys, because we have to use all the terms. There's no set amount of terms that we have to know, okay? We have to know everything, but that stuff takes time. And again, if you learn your prefixes, your suffixes, and root words, you can piece those words together, all right? But practice using your terms. Practice using medical terminology. Listen to shows like House. Remember the show House? You can watch it on, I'm sure, one of those. I don't know if Peacock has it or Amazon Prime has it. I don't know. One of them has got to have it. But they use a lot of medical terms, of course, in their show. I like House better than I like Grey's Anatomy, because Grey's Anatomy is more about the drama House was really good at talking about like sarcoidosis. I learned a lot about what that was by watching his show, but that's incorporating other things to learn medical terminology. Just listening to it helps, all right? And there's also all kinds of shows where they talk about like the ER and things like that. Not the show ER, but like there's like reality shows about that. And then you can listen to those types of shows that are also using medical terms, all right? So that's just something that it can kind of help you as well to kind of get you into that stimulus. You're never going to learn it if you always run away from it and you don't surround yourself with that stimulus. Put up the posters, put up the list that you can work on every single week, and know that you're not going to learn it overnight, okay? So be patient with yourself, but slow and steady wins the race, guys. It really does. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.